Hello, everyone, and welcome to George Talks Business. I'm Vanessa Perry, Associate Dean for Faculty and Research and Professor of Marketing and Strategic Management and Public Policy here at GWSB. George Talks Business is a weekly program where we feature thought leaders and business leaders and who are going to talk to us about topics of interest to the global marketplace. I'd also want to extend a warm welcome and thanks to the GW American Marketing Association chapter, as well as Capital Advertising for your support of this event. I'm pleased today to introduce my colleague and good friend, Donna Hoffman. Donna is the Louis Rosenfeld Distinguished Scholar and Professor of Marketing. She's also co-director of the Center for the Connected Consumer. Donna is a world-renowned scholar and expert on consumer interactions with technology, on digital marketing strategy, and on the Internet of Things. Donna, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Vanessa. I'm really glad to be here. And it's really a pleasure and an honor, and I'm excited about the opportunity. I should probably say I'm getting over a little bit of a cold, so there might be a little bit of coughing, but other than that, I'm glad to be here.
Well, thanks. Thanks for joining us. So tell us a little bit about your research on consumers and technology over the years.
Sure. So I got interested in studying the Internet in the mid-90s when the Internet became a commercial medium and it was no longer privatized. So that was around 93, 94. And I became very interested, along with my partner, Professor Tom Novak, who's also a professor here at GWSB in the marketing department. Became very interested in how this might impact consumer behavior and how the Internet might start to change things, how people make decisions about products, how they shop for information, and even how they buy information. So for the past 25 years, I've been studying a number of these issues. And when I first started, it was what we call phase one of the Internet. It was a very sort of linear process. Many of you in the audience probably remember, or some of you may be too young to remember, what those early web browsers looked like. Sort of think of Yahoo with all those sort of ugly links. But it was pretty clear even then that that opportunity to have access to that kind of information was really going to change things. And so I became very interested in studying online consumer behavior and did that for a number of years. And then we sort of entered the second phase of the Internet, which was the social phase. So poster child for that is clearly Facebook, which I'm sure everybody's really familiar with. And then it was interesting to see how these opportunities where first we were just connecting with information from phase one, we started to now have more computer-mediated interactions with people. And those really rose in prominence, and hence here we are in the rise of social media with billions of customers on Facebook. What I've recently become interested in maybe the past 4 or 5 years or so is the rise of the third phase of the Internet, which is the Internet of Things. And so if we think about all these everyday objects, what's happening now is they're all becoming connected to the Internet. And what's particularly interesting about them is they have varying degrees of smarts because they're powered by AI, artificial intelligence, which means there are machine learning and deep learning models that are running either in the cloud or maybe sometimes in the systems or devices themselves that give them capabilities that these objects didn't have before. And so over time, my work has become more interested in, first, what was the impact of this sort of static and linear Internet on consumer behavior, and then evolved into what is the impact of a more social medium on consumer behavior. And now I'm really interested in what is the impact of what we call these smart objects on consumer behavior. And I think it's kind of scary, kind of exciting, and really fascinating.
So it's very, very interesting issues here. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Internet of Things and give us some examples. But in particular, what I'm curious about is how is this changing marketing, and how is it changing the way marketers create products for consumers?
Okay, sure. So maybe first back up a little bit and give sort of set a background for this. Right now, there are probably around 20 billion objects that are connected to the internet and have some degree of smart. And when I use the term smart object, I use that as a catch-all for, you know, that could be an Amazon Alexa device, it could be a smart lock, but it can also be a service or a system, or it could be digital, it could be physical. There's like 20 billion of these kind of entities floating around globally that are in some way smart. The thing that's kind of interesting about this right now, so that's sort of how we'll define this IoT AI space, is there's only 7.3 billion people on the planet. So already there's 3 times as many of them than us. So that's something interesting to ponder. But if we take a look at estimates of how this is going to grow exponentially, by 2025 the estimates are that there will be over 100 billion of these smart objects, wildly dwarfing the number of people on the planet. And a lot of them are getting really smart. And I wouldn't want to say they're smarter than us yet, but I think we're definitely on that path. So if we think about this sort of view, this kind of ecosystem of the IoT, the Internet of Things, which I actually think is rapidly evolving into a different kind of IoT, an IoT we call the intelligence of things. And then we start to look at, okay, well, what's the impact of all these smart things kind of everywhere on the planet in terms of consumer behavior? Let me give you an example. And this is something from some of the work we've been doing here at GW. Let's take an example of a lock. So we have a lock on our house. And if you think about the role of the lock, so I'm going to get a little cultural and sociological for a moment. You imagine what is the role and the practice of a lock on a home? It's to keep people out of the house, right? That's the understanding of how a lock operates in our world and in our societies in most cases. But now imagine with the impact of the IoT and with the rise of smartphones and with machine learning programs which have interesting capabilities to learn our behavior. Now imagine we have a situation where we have a smart lock on our door. We have a smartphone and an app which gives us information about who might be entering that smartphone, that lock, and even gives us the capability to give authority to some people to use the lock or get a code for the lock. Also imagine, for example, we have a refrigerator in the home that itself might be smart and could give us information about what products we might be low on. Maybe it can even reorder those eggs. It lets us know when the milk is becoming expired, things of that. So I've sort of created this sort of mini version of this new emerging ecosystem. And so where this lock previously functioned, this sort of simple, static, kind of stupid lock, functioned as a way to keep people out and did a really good job of doing that. Now we have a situation where I could order groceries online from my app, for example, or my phone, my computer, my iPad, whatever. And I could have those groceries delivered by someone I don't know, a stranger, who I could give authority to enter my home through that lock, that keypad. I could watch that stranger enter my home through the camera that's also installed in my home and connected through the internet, and all of these devices are connected to each other. And that stranger could then, who has this authority, could deliver those groceries, enter my home, open my refrigerator, and put them in my refrigerator, and then exit my home. So where we once had this lock, which functioned as this mechanism to keep people out, we now have this entire assemblage of devices all connected to each other that are functioning in very different ways, which actually are giving entree to people to do things when I'm not even there. So if you think about it, the impact of that is profound, where I'm now giving people access, whereas in a different world, a world of 5 years ago, there's no way I would have ever said it was okay for some delivery person to come into my home, enter my home, and go into my refrigerator and put food, something that then goes into my mouth. It's stunning, really. And so what we're really interested in is, first, how do these sort of practices emerge and evolve because these devices are connected to each other in these really interesting ways and all connected to the internet, and have the ability to learn about our behaviors and our needs and what we like and what we don't like, but also what the implications are for marketing practice. And there again, the implications, I think, are nothing short of revolutionary, because the ways that marketers have been used to interacting with consumers are going to have to change, because we're going to have to take into account the objects and how to incorporate the objects in the way that we actually start marketing, maybe through the objects to consumers, where the objects themselves have needs and preferences because they also learn.
Wow. So you mentioned that this is all sort of running on the basis of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So what exactly, how are they different than sort of our traditional sort of computer programs?
Okay, so that's a great question, and I think that there is a lot of, maybe not even confusion, but just not a lot of knowledge, right? I mean, everyone in this room hears the word AI all the time, maybe multiple times a day. It's in the popular press, it's on the news, it's everywhere. You know, it's in your classes, I'm sure, and so on. But I think there's still not that great of an understanding. The way that I like to think about it, and that I teach it in my classes here, but also that I incorporate in my research, is this idea that AI is the big tent idea. And so this idea of artificial intelligence means that a machine has an intelligence to be able to conduct tasks according to some goal. But if we think about, so that's a pretty general idea. But underneath AI is this notion of machine learning. And machine learning are programs that basically are based on pattern recognition that attempt to see patterns in different kinds of data and then make predictions about whether, you know, this is a cat, a very popular application in early computer science applications. You know, this is a cat, this is not a cat, and things of that nature. It's pretty much that simple, whether it's computer vision or different types of machine learning programs. The difference between, and then we sort of go down this pyramid. AI is kind of the big tent, then we have machine learning, then the next idea is deep learning. And really the only difference between deep learning models and machine learning models is the complexity, the number of layers, the number of networks, the number of GPUs that are used. And right now, when most people talk about AI, they're talking about deep learning. And so when we hear the the phenomenal achievements of Google's DeepMind projects with AlphaGo, for example, or text learning applications that are able to write text in the voice of a person just by learning how that person might write something down, those are deep learning models. And they're very powerful models, and they're becoming even more powerful as computers are becoming more powerful. And the training sets, or the data that they're being used to train on, we're having more and more availability of that data, and so we're able to do better and better prediction.
Wow. So what are some of the challenges then? If we've got this deep learning going on, and we've got all of the things are so smart. What are the challenges? And I'm particularly interested in some of the potential ethical considerations.
Okay, so there's that's also another really interesting area. Since you're interested in the sort of the challenge side and some of these ethical concerns, I think one of the big areas now is related to bias in algorithms. So there are there's been quite a bit of research, and it's a really exciting emerging area, that's making it very clear that because algorithms are built by humans, and I think it's important to say mostly white men, those men bring their own biases, stereotypes, and preferences into the construction of those algorithms. And then the outcome can be that those algorithms themselves can be discriminatory. The sort of becoming, I think, a canonical example of this is the training that has been done on some of Google's algorithms, where the computer vision algorithms are really good at recognizing faces. So there's facial recognition is a very important area in AI, which also, as an aside, has a lot of interesting marketing applications, because we can figure out as we're watching shoppers go through stores how old you are, maybe what your emotions are, what your gender is, and then we can track you, connect that to other data, and then get pretty good at maybe it looks like you're not having a great time in the store, and we'll send a sales associate over to see if we can help you find that sweater. So that's the sort of thing that's kind of happening right now, and to me that also has ethical implications, but we can put that aside for a moment. But the broader issue is to get back to the Google example, is that these algorithms are really good at recognizing white faces, if they're men, awful at recognizing African American faces, and not as bad, but not very good at recognizing females. So that has a lot of implications for societal applications of, for example, let's imagine smart cars that use computer vision. And well, that's great if you're a white guy crossing the street, you won't get hit. But what would happen if you were an African American crossing the street? So I'm sort of stretching that out. That's not going to happen right now. But if we don't recognize that these algorithms have biases or are only as good as the training that goes into them, we can have some serious problems. Another really famous example is Amazon has, obviously does also a lot of work in this area, and they trained an algorithm to go through resumes for hiring. And the algorithm was trained on male resumes, and successful male resumes. And because it left out the female resumes from women, the words women tend to use on their resumes are different than some of the words men use when they're describing their skill sets, for example. And even the kinds of jobs women have might be different from some of the jobs men have had in the past, and even their majors and things like that. And as a consequence, that algorithm recommends no women to be hired in some of these technical fields. So these are just sort of the top line popular press examples that have sort of permeated out to the media level, but I think they're very important because they suggest that there are a number of concerns as our applications of AI race ahead and become extremely important in our society. There are many calls now to not for it to stop, but that we have to take a step back and understand how these are being constructed, who's constructing them, and then what the implications are. The other big concern is, for example, some people don't get mortgages because of the way the algorithms have been trained, and particularly blacks, or because of the training data sets, are seen as not as good of risks, and that's clearly discriminatory. So I think that's one ethical concern. The other one I think that is really worth talking about is privacy. So one of the things I think many people don't realize if you're not working in the area is that for AI to be good, it needs a lot of data. Because the whole point of machine learning and deep learning models is they have to be trained. So there are what are called training data sets, and then they're called test data sets. And the bigger the training data set, the better the model will be, the better the predictions will be when we move to the test data set. And so these models are really hungry, right? And so big companies are really good at sort of scarfing up all this data that are necessary for all of this training. And if you think about it, what is that data about? that's about you. So that's everything that we are all doing in society, our digital footprints, our click streams, our physical footprints, our credit card information, the information marketers have about us, everything you do on social media, and so on. All of this is amalgamated or aggregated into massively large data sets, which are then used to train these algorithms. And so while that's exciting, right, from a perspective of we can get really good at predicting what you might be likely to buy tomorrow on the next click, whether you'll click on this ad, whether you're going to buy this brand of milk in the supermarket, whatever it might be. At the same time, consumers aren't really aware and haven't really given their consent for this level of data to be scraped and captured about them and then effectively used to kind of predict the next thing that's going to happen. So, there's been a lot of popular talk about with all of these advertiser-supported models, particularly on social media, that that's the price we have to pay. We don't want to subscribe, so in exchange we watch ads, and you've probably heard that phrase, well, you're the product, right? You're what the advertiser is buying, and if you're willing for that exchange, then you don't have to pay for Facebook because you're the product. But actually, that's not correct. I think the correct way to think about this is that we are not the product. Instead, what is being offered is the prediction of what we're likely to do next. And so what we're giving up is some sense of agency about the next step in our behavior. And so it's not that my eyeballs are the product or my mere presence, as is often promoted in an advertising context, but rather, can I get her to do this thing I want her to do next based on all the information I have about her and all the other people like her? That is a significant concern for our society. And we can start to think about the idea of, okay, well, right now, maybe how much agency do I have in all of my interactions in the physical world and the digital world? But at some point, I might start to think about, can that loss of agency lead to loss of free will? Particularly as these devices and smart objects that I'm using kind of generally get better and better, smarter and smarter at knowing what I'm likely to do next. Maybe even before I know it.
Wow.
I'm not trying to freak you out.
I am thoroughly freaked out, and I have two concerns, two things that really are keeping me up at night. One is, how likely is it that as a professor and associate dean, I'm going to be replaced by a robot? So, if the machines can learn, the machines can teach, and so I'm concerned about that. My other concern is something that has just followed me since I saw this movie. So I don't know if anyone's ever seen this movie, Demon Seed. I'm dating myself. It's a 1977 movie where this guy developed this supercomputer that was artificially intelligent. It was organic, whatever that means, and it was programmed to be able to overcome any of its limitations. So it would keep trying until it figured out how to overcome its own limitations. Like, I'm a computer, I can't have a baby. At any rate, the computer becomes obsessed with the creator's wife, locks him out of the house and kidnaps her. And I can't remember how the movie ended. Anyway, it was a horror movie, it was frightening. And I'm wondering how likely something like that could something like that happen?
Okay, so I saw that movie, and I think he does impregnate her with some of the guy's sperm, and it is completely creepy. But I think that's probably not that likely. But what you're alluding to is what we call the singularity. And so it's this idea, which I think has been popularized as eventually the machines will take over, right? And so if you're a Battlestar Galactica fan like I am, this is the idea of the rise of the Cylons, right? And so we've created these machines, right? We create them, we endow them with these characteristics through these sophisticated deep learning models where we help them learn what we're like, and then they start to learn about themselves. And the idea of the singularity is literally, the definition is that machines can become self-replicating. And this notion that they then can program themselves to get better and better and smarter and smarter. That future, I believe, is happening, will happen. I think it's absolutely going to occur. The question is when. So when will we get to the singularity, which is that point when the machines will be better at programming themselves to get better than we would be? Ray Kurzweil, a big proponent of the singularity, thinks maybe we're 30 years out. Other scientists and technologists think it might never happen. Some might think we need the computers to get a lot faster, so maybe it's 100 years out. But I think eventually we are looking toward a future like that. And I think that brings us back to some of these other issues we talked about before, suggesting that the time is now to start thinking about the inputs, right? Because the machines that we create that become super smart and eventually in some way take over, even if they're not going to come around and decide we're like ants and kill us, we're creating them. And so these are the discussions, I think, that are happening in many universities and even in industry now about what do we need to do to prepare for that time.
Awesome. Thank you. So one last question, which is really, is there anything else that you can add, and particularly anything that managers should be on the lookout for?
Well, I think if we sort of bring it back to marketing, so let's come down from philosophy and the end of the world. But if we think about marketing, I think probably the most important thing, and I talk about this a lot in my classes here at GWSB with my students, is I think it is vitally important that students get as much quantitative training as they can in these techniques. And so I think it's critical that we proceed educating our students on data science, business analytics, artificial intelligence, and deep learning and machine learning models, and that even in my marketing and advertising classes, I stress how critical it is that marketing has really moved from a qualitative, largely qualitative profession to a highly quantitative profession that's involved in the analysis of very large data sets to try to understand consumer behavior. And I think long run, the success of our students and the success of the field will in large part depend on that expertise.
Wow, great. Great. Okay, well, I'm Vanessa Perry, still human, and really glad that you joined us here today, Donna, for George Talks Business.
Thanks, Vanessa. I had a great time.
I'm hoping that you all will join us again next week, where we are featuring Frank Sesno, the director of the GW School of Media and Public Affairs. He's going to be talking about another hot topic, which is the dubious future of media and politics. So thank you all for coming, and hope to see you all soon.
Ladies and gentlemen, the live broadcast